Well, hi there. So in this video, we're going to take a look at extra practice module 17, which is all about aggregate demand. So I think that this module is helpful, but I'll just kind of preface by saying there's a few things in it that aren't covered in the lectures and that aren't covered in the problem sets. And there's two multiple choice questions that actually I'm going to remove from your quiz because I don't think that they really fit particularly well with what we were learning. So just a kind of heads up as we kind of get into this. So let's do the check your understanding. Number one says determine the effect on aggregate demand of each of the following. So it gives you a prompt, and it says explain whether it's a shift of the curve, left or right, whether it's a movement along. So remember, if it's a movement along, that's happening because of a change in price level. So remember, price levels don't shift the curve, right? So a movement along the curve would be inflation happened or price level changed or something like that. But most of the others are going to be a shift. Okay, let's take a look. 1A, a rise in the interest rate caused by a change in monetary policy. So that's going to be saying it's not caused by price levels, right? So this is the interest rate actually changing, not caused by price levels. And if the interest rate's going up, then we know that consumption and investment are going to fall. So we'd say, therefore, aggregate demand decreases. B, a fall in the real value of money in the economy due to a higher aggregate price level. Boom, price levels right there. So no shift, right? And what we would say is that if the price level is higher, right, we can kind of ignore almost the first half of this question. The price level is higher, so we'd say, quantity of aggregate demand, right? Remember, they move inversely. So when price level goes up, quantity of aggregate demand goes down. And so we're kind of sliding down the curve. C, news of a worse than expected job market next year. So that's going to affect consumption spending, and that's going to reduce it today. So we'd say aggregate demand decreases. D, a fall in tax rates, again, consumption, but this one's going to be an increase because if you're lowering taxes, people will spend more. Aggregate demand goes up. E, a rise in the real value of assets in the economy due to lower aggregate price level. Price levels don't shift the curve. Remember, price levels don't shift the curve. So no shift. And because the price level is lower, we know that quantity of aggregate demand is inverse. So this one, quantity of aggregate demand goes up. And F, a rise in the real value of assets in the economy due to a surge in real estate values. So real estate values, this one's tricky. Think about, what's going to affect maybe if people think their houses are worth a lot more. It's kind of like if their stock portfolio was worth a lot more. And this one, think about the wealth, the consumer wealth. And if you're feeling good about your wealth, you're going to go buy some more stuff. So this is a shifter of consumption. It's going to rise, causing aggregate demand to go up. Okay, let's take a look at these multiple choice. And like I said, there's two in here that I'm going to take out of the set. So number one, just do these along this side here. Number one, which of the following explains the slope of the aggregate demand curve? Remember, there's three reasons. You have the net exports effect, the interest rate effect, and the wealth or real balance effect. Let's see what these are. The wealth effect of a change in price level, that's one. The interest rate effect of the change in the price level, that's two. Product substitution effect of a change, that's totally made up. So 1 and 2 only, D. Number two, which of the following will shift the aggregate demand curve to the right? So this is, I think, the question that I don't like the answer in. So I'm actually going to change this answer. First, it says a decrease in wealth. Well, if there's a decrease in wealth, then consumers aren't going to spend as much. So that would actually shift the aggregate demand curve to the left. So A is not correct. B, pessimistic consumer expectations. Again, consumers would reduce their spending, so aggregate demand would shift to the left. C is actually the right answer, and I'll talk about it in a second. D, contractionary fiscal policy. Again, contracting aggregate demand through fiscal policy. We haven't really talked about it, what fiscal policy is or contractionary in that sense. We're going to learn that in 7.3, but that would contract aggregate demand. And so that's kind of raising taxes, right, would be a good example of contractionary fiscal policy. And a decrease in the quantity of money, that's monetary policy. I didn't talk at all about monetary policy. You can see why I don't really like this question very much. The correct answer, a decrease in the existing stock of capital. That's another shifter of aggregate demand that I didn't really talk about. The translation in this, and it will make sense, is that if there haven't been a whole lot of investments lately in new machines and new buildings and things like that, then businesses are kind of going to go, oh, gee, we're a little short on new machines. We need to increase our spending on them. And so if there's been a decrease in the existing stock of it, The thinking being that then businesses will respond to that by spending more money on it, which would increase investment spending and increase aggregate demand. So the right answer for number 2 is C, but I am not going to put that one into the set. Number 3, the Consumer Confidence Index is used to measure what's the following. Well, that's just kind of how consumers feel about the economy. And so that would be C, expectations. That's a great question. Consumer expectations. Decreases in the stock market decrease aggregate demand by decreasing what? And we know that what they do is they affect consumers' wealth and their perceptions of wealth. And we can see that in the list as A. Great question as well. Number 5, the answer to this one is another one where I'm not particularly happy because, again, we look at the government policy stuff a little bit later in this unit. Which of the following will shift it to the left? So decrease aggregate demand. A decrease in the quantity of money actually would do that. But we aren't talking about monetary policy in this unit. So A is the right answer, but I'm going to pull this question out of the set. Let's talk through the other 4, though, because I think this type of question will appear on your exam. An increase in the government purchases of goods and services. No, that's increasing G, so aggregate demand would go up. Decrease in taxes, that would cause aggregate demand to go up. Decrease in interest rates, that would cause aggregate demand to go up. And an increase in transfers, again, aggregate demand goes up. So actually the correct answer is A, but I am going to pull that one out of your set. Okay, the last question, FRQ number 2, identify the 2 effects that cause the aggregate demand curve to have a downward slope. So your book actually only talks about 2 of them, and I taught you about 3 of them, the net exports effect. So the first one you can say is the wealth effect or the real balance. And they're both kind of the same thing. If you remember, I had a $20 bill in class that I showed real balance effect. Sorry, I was getting carried away and I forgot what I was writing. And this one is the idea that if price levels go up, we'd say, therefore, the purchasing power of money goes down. And so therefore the quantity of consumption goes down, right? That's the idea. And it relates basically the inverse relationship, because the inverse relationship between aggregate demand, quantity of aggregate demand, and price levels, right? So we know that if the price level goes up, the quantity of aggregate demand will go down, and it's because of that. Now, the second reason is called the interest rate effect. Interest rate effect. And I'm going to explain it with a similar story. This is direct from the lecture notes. And it's the idea of if the price level goes up, we'd say that lenders will increase their interest rates, right? And they do that because they want to keep their real rate the same, or at least they're trying to. And that has the effect of discouraging, that's a down arrow, borrowing. Discourages borrowing. And so therefore, we can say that the quantity of consumption decreases and the quantity of investment decreases, and that would be a decrease in the quantity of aggregate demand. And so we can see here that, once again, the price level goes up, quantity of aggregate demand goes down, and this one is because of the interest rate effect on the quantity of consumption. Again, both of these are reasons why the aggregate demand curve is downward sloping. They are not the shifters, though, of aggregate demand. So hopefully this helped you. I'll see you next time.